Well, thanks everybody for coming today. I was a little disappointed we didn't have the Clydesdales out back, but I think you're going to find this to be an incredibly special insight, special presentation on really one of this nation's not just great companies, great family businesses, and a very, very interesting enterprise. I'm Tim Mescon, Dean of the Coles College of Business, and we are in our 17th year with this Tetley series. And if you have any time, we've got, you'll see in the programs, which we'll give out immediately after the speech or on these displays, who has participated in this series since 1990. It's really been an impressive array of leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives from a host of industries, bringing, I think, great value to what we do in our academic degree programs. Speaking of which, those of you in the Coles College as majors, just this week the Princeton Review came out with their 2007 edition of Best Business Schools in the United States. I'm glad with faculty here to say that we're very delighted that the Coles College was listed in that Princeton Review list for 2007. So I think we owe a round of applause to the faculty. Thank you for that fantastic work. The only other bit of housekeeping I wanted to mention, our final Tetley lecture for the fall semester will be on Thursday, November 16th at 5 p.m. Very interesting opportunity for us. Glenn Howenstein, who's Executive Vice President and actually Chief Network and Revenue Management Officer for Delta Airlines, will be speaking. And be very interesting to hear from an executive who's in the middle of trying to reinvent an organization, and so these insights from Delta should be fascinating. 142 years ago, Adolphus Busch joined a fledgling brewery that would later become Anheuser-Busch. Now, while the company's early years were demanding, Mr. Busch proved up to the challenge. His keen vision, bold initiative, marketing savvy, and passionate commitment to quality were his legacy to those who followed, both in the Busch family and outside the Busch family. Today, Anheuser-Busch produces the two best-selling beers in the world, Budweiser and Bud Light. Operates 12 breweries in the United States and other brewing operations around the globe. In the United States, Anheuser-Busch holds a 48.8% market share of United States beer sales. Worldwide, and I stand to be corrected, Anheuser-Busch's beer sales volume is somewhere in the neighborhood of 122 million barrels. 2006, Michelob Ultra Amber was introduced, a product that we had a discussion about at lunch. Some of you may be familiar with as well. Anheuser-Busch operations and resources are focused on adding not only to life's enjoyment, but through a number of initiatives as well, including theme park entertainment and packaging. The company has interests in malt production, rice milling, real estate development, turf farming, metallized and paper label printing, bottle production, and transportation services. Today's Tetley Distinguished Lecturer, Steve McDaniel, who is not just plant manager of the Cartersville Brewery, which in and of itself would be exceptional, but has overall management responsibilities for the 12 breweries domestically, has been with this company, with Anheuser-Busch, for almost 3 decades. His career has taken him through the company's breweries in Jacksonville, Merrimack, New Hampshire, Fort Collins, Colorado, and now in Cartersville, Georgia. He's a Texas native, graduate of the University of North Florida, father and grandfather, and the Coles College and University are looking forward to aggressively expanding our partnership, our career opportunities between you, our students, undergraduate and graduate, and Anheuser-Busch. So won't you help me welcome today's Tetley Distinguished Lecturer, Steve McDaniel.
Good afternoon. When I walked in, I leaned over and said, I can't believe this many people are still interested in beer. For the next 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to share with you our enthusiasm, our love, and our romance for one of the oldest industries in the United States, the industry of brewing, packaging, and consuming alcoholic beverage beer. And most of you don't know, but there is a historical slant to beer. If you've read the Mayflower Compact, one of the reasons they chose Plymouth Rock is they were out of ale. And they needed to plant grain to ensure that they could produce ale for the upcoming season. So such historical landmarks were often coincidental to man's desire for beer. Absolutely. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, I have with me today a partner that he and I have served together both in Fort Collins, Colorado, completely redesigning an organization, making it one of the most efficient and effective organizations in the Anheuser-Busch system and one of the most efficient breweries in America. And when I came to Cartersville, I asked him if he would come with me as my senior human resource manager. And if any of you are thinking about a career with Anheuser-Busch, he's the one you'll want to suck up to, Mr. Jim Walsh. Jim? One last item before we plunge into this is I do a lot of this. Mostly I do this for my employees. We have regular communication meetings where I update my employees on the state of the business and the state of our industry, because we are in a fiercely competitive battle with our competition. We try to reinvent ourselves on a continuing basis, because if we don't, we will be the beer your father enjoyed, not the beer you enjoy consuming. So for that reason, you're going to see some very new and dynamic packaging, but we're also going to take a trip down memory lane for a few moments to look at what Budweiser used to look like. Okay? So with that, and you can ask questions anytime. That's one of the ground rules we have with our employees is please don't wait to the end because you'll forget it. Either that or I won't be able to find it in the presentation to address it. So please, if you have a question, raise your hand, and I'm more than happy to start and stop just to get your question answered. Okay? So now we're going to test my IT skills. And that's my presentation. Jim had a bet that I could not get this far. What we're going to do over the next hour is we're going to talk about really 5 things. We're going to talk about the U.S. beer market, and we're going to take a macro view of the U.S. industry. And then we're going to do a micro view, which is Anheuser-Busch within that industry in America. Then we're going to look at Anheuser-Busch internationally. And I think it's real important that we look at Anheuser-Busch internationally because if any of you looked at our annual report, it said that last year sales decreased in the United States by 1.8%, but increased by 50.7% internationally. So when you're looking at growth, you're looking offshore. Although we're going to spend quite a bit of time looking at what we do here in the United States to grow our market share. Then we're going to take Anheuser-Busch Micro, and when we take Anheuser-Busch Micro, we're going to talk about the place I love the most, Cartersville and Cartersville Brewery. And we're going to talk about how complex we are. We're the second most complex brewery in the world. You're going to see brands, you're going to see packages that I'm sure you've never seen before. And they are for niche markets and sub-market categories because we want to be competitive in everything we do. As a matter of fact, I'll show you an illustration of the categories at the supermarket, IRI data, at which we're #1 in almost every category that supermarkets rate. And then we're going to end with, so when you have the #1 and #2 selling brand in the world, when you're on top, where do you go? And how do you go there? And what's the packaging around it? See how quickly you get used to my technology? No clapping or anything. Let's talk for just a few minutes about total alcohol servings. By the way, the numbers followed by the letter B is billion. So for example, in the 21 to 27 age group, wine is 1.5 billion servings for that age group a year. What you should glean from this is really three things. #1 is that beer is still the favorite alcohol beverage regardless of age group. It also, the second thing is that if you are going to be competitive in the adult alcohol beverage category, you better know your demographics. Because as you notice, one of the biggest demographics, the 50 and over, beer is waning as they switch from beer to wine and alcohol. And we're going to talk a little bit about some packaging and some brands that target 50 and over. We're also going to talk about brands that really focus on the 21 to 34-year-old two categories. Okay? The third thing is that you can see that beer is the predominant category of the 21 to 34-year-old. They're very much interested in that. They like to experiment. Most of you probably fall into that category. A few of you, 21 to 34. Yeah. And then there's us, 21 to 34 wannabes, right? Yes. And you can see at the very bottom the percent of alcohol consumption versus the percent of the population that's made up. We analyze this, we slice and dice this data in an effort to understand what we must target as far as new brands and new packages to support the demand in these categories. So if you thought it was just about going out having fun and drinking beer, you see very quickly it's not. We take it very seriously, and that's probably because of the fact that 1 out of every 2 beers roughly in America that's sold is one of our products. So any increase that we see, we expect to get half of that volume in increase every year. So this is some unique packaging, and this is some unique brands that we have within Anheuser-Busch. We rolled every one of these brands out within the last 30 months. These are not traditional brands. As a matter of fact, conspicuously missing from these brands is Budweiser, Bud Light, Michelob, Michelob Light. These are all new brands focused solely at sub-markets and specific category demand. For example, if you look in the top right-hand corner, let's see, I can even point these out, I think. A partnership here with Bacardi. It's an alternative beverage. It's malt-based, but it's also a flavor like watermelon, a fruit flavor. It does not have the carbonation of beer, and it's targeted at the female 21 to 34-year-old consumer. Now, if you look back over in the middle, you'll see Brewmasters. First of all, it's a Magnum bottle. It's 8% alcohol by volume, and it has a slight bourbon cask aftertaste to it. That is for the 50-plus-year-old category, especially the men in the 50-plus-year-old category. Every one of the packages and brands that you see are focused specifically for one of the categories that I just showed you. At the very center, Jekyll and Hyde. Has anyone had Jekyll and Hyde? It's actually in the Atlanta area. Very interesting. When I said that I didn't care for it, Anheuser-Busch III, our chairman, said, "You're too old, that's the reason." I said, well, I must be. But it is targeted at the young, female, on-premise nightclub crowd subsegment. So is Pills at the very bottom. Tilp is a high caffeine, high alcohol, raspberry and now lemon lime, 16-ounce beer. I don't know that we can get much more complex than that. And then a college campus favorite in the very back is Natty Up. That's natural light, 6% alcohol with high caffeine. My little brother said that that gives you a very unique alert intoxication. I'm not sure what's happening to our industry. But if I were here 10 years ago today, if I were here 15 years ago today, we would be focusing on 4 brands in a portfolio. They would have been Bud, Bud Light, Busch, and Michelob family brands. That would have been it. Today, if you've walked down the aisle of your favorite supermarket, liquor store, or wherever you buy adult beverages, it's almost confusing. You have to know exactly what you're looking for, not to be so confused on that aisle. That's one of the reasons why we spend about $1 billion a year on advertising, is to help you make up your mind when you go to those stores. And beer's still king. Yes, sir.
I just have a quick question on the Budweiser Select. What is the target for that particular beer?
Budweiser Select is 21 to 27. It is for the group that is disinterested in light beers because they taste watery and light and too light. If you've ever had a Bud Select, it's got a lot more flavor than Bud Light. It's also low carbs because it was introduced at the tail end of the carb craze. So it's also for the health conscious, like we were talking about at lunch, the health conscious beer consumer. Now that is, wait a minute. You know, I said the same thing. You know, I was proud of my beer belly, but in fact, there is very calorie and carb conscious alcohol beverages out there today. As a matter of fact, we were talking at lunch that if you look at Michelob Ultra is the first beer introduced that doctors will actually allow diabetics to consume because the carbohydrates are so low in that drink. So we always believed that a couple of beers a day was healthy for you. But now we know that even folks that are somewhat less than perfect health can enjoy our products. That sounded like a commercial, didn't it? Should have been in marketing. But beer, another question.
Sir, Andrew Jones. The question that I have is in regards to the new beer that you have out, I guess the new packaging that you have out that I didn't see on the last screen, with aluminum can with the Bud Light. Can you kind of explain what market you're targeting for that?
And I promise you I did not pay Andrew for that segue. Andrew, I'll get to that in just a few moments as we talk about the next generation of packaging. Yes, very good. Beer is still king. There are numerous social events that if you were to conjure them up in your mind, beer would be the natural adult beverage for those events. Even though I can tell you that wine, as recently as the 4th of July, tried to make inroads into a national historic beer holiday, the 4th of July, by saying, when you're at the barbecue, why don't you have a glass of wine? And I turned to my wife and said, that's what our country's come to. But actually, 57 out of every 100 servings of alcohol is a beer. America's love affair for beer continues today, just like it did 200 years ago. And people today are just as enamored with not only the process, but with the socialization of the product as they have ever been. So really what we're looking to do at Anheuser-Busch is to, of course, grow these beer drinking occasions, these social occasions. We have a product that I very proudly say that we add pleasure to life. We make events fun. And when used in a responsible manner, it adds enjoyment to the event. And we don't think that hard liquor or wine adds near that enjoyment to the event that beer does. And we wouldn't say it. Just fair. Now, within the U.S. market, I said before the market actually shrunk slightly last year. And our share of the market shrunk slightly last year. We have 51.2% in the first quarter of this year. I believe Tim said 48.8 was I think that was the market share for 2005. We've had a pretty good year so far. We're up slightly this year. When you're talking about 104 million barrels of beer being up 1% is a pretty good amount of volume. But we have competitors. Because we're not growing at 1.5% as an industry, we have to grow based upon taking market share from our competitors. And we have really two major competitors in the United States. They are South African breweries, SAB Miller, who owns Miller Brewing Company and whose probably portfolio leader is light beer from Miller. And of course we have Molson Coors, a partnership between Canadian-owned Molson and Coors Brewing out of Golden, Colorado. And of course, their portfolio leader is Coors Light. And then Pabst and a couple of others have a small market share. Imports are very significant. The biggest leader in imports is, anybody? Corona. Corona. It might surprise you to know that Anheuser-Busch owns 50% of Grupo Modelo, the parent company of Corona. So for those of you that felt that, gosh, he came to talk to us and I don't drink his product, I drink Corona, we're still okay. We'll talk later, but we're still okay. And then, of course, others are about 8%, and that includes all the micros across the United States. And micros still play a small but significant role in our industry because they still bring interest and experimentation to our industry. Regardless of what you think of a micro, it's too strong, it's too bitter, it's too strong alcohol, it's not strong enough. Regardless of what you think, that creates interest by you in the industry overall. And when you have 51.7% of the market and interest grows, you grow at a rate of about 51% of that interest. So we like micros. I referred to this a few moments ago, and we strive to be the #1 brewer in every segment that is categorized. And this is IRI, this is InfoScan data. This is what happens when you scan a 6-pack of Budweiser at the supermarket. It goes into a data bank, and we record all of this, from overnight data all the way to weekend and monthly trends of InfoScan data. I'm proud to tell you that regardless of whether you're talking about premium, premium light, specialty brands, popular brands, value brands, or even the non-alcohol category, we hold the #1 place in all of those. In addition, because of our equity position and ownership of Grupo Modelo in Mexico, we own 50% of that import, and that is #1 import, Corona. So we strive, our fair share is to be #1 in any category that we compete in. That's our definition of fair share. And we do this through a network of 12 breweries. When Tim introduced me, he talked about the places that I had been, and anybody that's with Anheuser-Busch has done a tour of duty we call See America on Anheuser-Busch's dime. I have been as far north as Merrimack, New Hampshire. I've been as far west as Fort Collins, Colorado. I started with a company in Jacksonville, Florida. My human resource manager has been to 4 breweries. Also, not all 4 of them with me, but we do share 3 of the 4 breweries in our experience space. These facilities were picked for 2 reasons. Number 1, because of the quality of the water, because beer is 92 to 95% water. So it's very important you start with outstanding water. And by the way, in North Georgia, we have outstanding water quality. The second, of course, is we need to get our product to market, so logistics is just as important. And if you look, almost every one of these facilities intersect with a major interstate highway, ours, of course, being Interstate 75, which runs right in front of the Cartersville facility. But every one of these is built very close to an interstate connection in our effort to get the freshest possible beer to our wholesalers in the least amount of time. So let's talk about international, because that's where we're growing. That's where it's exciting right now, and that's where we're going to see even more growth in the coming years. And I really want to focus on 2 areas of our growth, that being China and Russia. First of all, we're sold in over 80 countries. We do not have breweries in 80 countries. About 70 countries we have partnerships with other brewers. For example, when I talk about Russia in St. Petersburg, we are in a partnership with Heineken, and Heineken makes Budweiser for Russia for Anheuser-Busch. And in 2005, we sold 47 million barrels of the world's finest beer. Now, in America, we sold just over 101 million barrels. But that 47 is up 20 million barrels in just 1 year, as China and Russia and South America all come on board with disposable income and disposable spending. So we're the world's largest brewer, and whether you're in Wuhan, China, Paris, France, or London, England, you can find a Budweiser. Time magazine said that Budweiser is the #1 beer in the world for one reason. Whether you're in Cartersville, Georgia, or Wuhan, China, a Budweiser will taste like a Budweiser. And we're real proud of that. We work very hard to maintain a consistent and dependable drinkability to our product. And that's catching on around the world. So we're now starting in Russia. And the Russians have the 5th largest beer market. But more importantly, they're growing at a double-digit rate of growth. And there's really 2 reasons for that. The first is anything American, they're in love with, whether it's Levi Jeans or Budweiser. The second is that the Russian young population, 21 to 34, is trying to steer away from liquor and vodka and trying a lighter, less alcohol drink. And they have fallen in love with Budweiser. So we're very proud of our partnership with Heineken, and we're very proud to be in Russia today. It is not an easy place to do business in. A great success story of ours is China. In 1995, we entered the China market by buying a rundown brewery on the Wuhan River in the city of Wuhan. We put $300 million into that facility, quadrupled its volume, and today it is the #1 brewery in China. That's the one that's up 6.6% year over year, the first quarter sales growth. Just as important as Harbin. Harbin, we purchased 11 breweries of the Harbin family. They are up 11%. And we have a 27% equity position in Tsingtao. Tsingtao is imported into the United States. You should be able to get a Tsingtao at your favorite Chinese restaurant. If not, please call the wholesaler here in Atlanta, and we'll get Tsingtao into that. Harbin has also just begun being imported on the west coast of the United States. What this really is, though, is this was a real gamble in 1995 when the Chinese were just exploring a term called disposable income. And they could not afford a Budweiser. Most Budweisers sold in this country sell for about as much as they made in a day. However, in 10 years, the Chinese economy has blossomed. And today, China represents probably our greatest opportunity for international sustained double-digit growth. And it's truly been a success story. The Wuhan Brewery was named the #1 industry business in China last year by the Chinese government because of our commitment not only to putting that kind of money into infrastructure, because our facilities you do not pick up and move easily. You don't pick them up and move them at all. They're capital intense and they're in the ground. They're tankage, pipage, heavy-duty filling equipment, packaging equipment. When we put money into a community, we're there to stay. And the Chinese had never seen a business put that kind of money into the ground. Even their other breweries were makeshift kind of breweries that would last 5 years and then had to either be rebuilt or just torn down. If you were to go to the Wuhan Brewery in China, you could not really tell the difference between that facility and the one that's 25 miles up the road from here. They're both state-of-the-art, highly technical, highly automated facilities. So we're real proud of the relationship we have with not only the Chinese government, but also our employees in China. We employ about 2,500 people between the breweries and our marketing effort in China. Which, by the way, most people don't know, but China has a logistics problem. You can't get your product to market very easily in China. There's no interstates. There's no highways. So if you looked at where all of these breweries are, they're strategically placed close to population centers so that we can get our product to the population centers quickly and easily, while at the same time they enjoying the traditional label of brands that they grew up knowing, like Harbin. So now let's go micro, and that's the Cartersville Brewery. It's probably the brewery I'm proudest of. It is the #1 brewery in the Anheuser-Busch system. It is one of the 2 most complex breweries in the world. It is one of the 2 most complex breweries in the Anheuser-Busch system. It's the newest brewery in the Anheuser-Busch system. Everyone comes to visit us, they say, well, the brewery's still new. But actually, the brewery is getting some age on it. It opened in 1993. The site was selected in July of 1988 and opened in June of 93. Our first expansion to 6.6 million barrels. By the way, a U.S. barrel is 31 gallons. It's also 13 and a half cases of 12-ounce servings. So we produce about 1 million cases of beer a week. And in '97, we expanded that to 6.6 million. I came to the Cartersville Brewery in 2001. In 2002, I convinced the board of directors to give us millions of dollars. I believe it was $54 million to modernize the facility. That's when I found out they all thought that we were still brand new. And they said, what are we spending this money for? But it was a productivity improvement effort that took the brewery from 6.6 million to 8.1 million barrels. And right now we are about 4th or 5th in volume among the Anheuser-Busch systems. But when it comes to overall brewery performance, we are #1 for 3 years in a row. So here's what we do. This year we will produce 8.14 million barrels of the world's finest beer. We have 24 different brands and 465 different packages that we produce on a 2-week cycle, making us the most complex brewery in the Anheuser-Busch system. We have 1 million square feet under roof, which is very important if you're the mayor of Cartersville and you're trying to tax me on it. The brewery site is on 1,700 acres. We ship and receive over 400 trucks a day. And many of you on Interstate 75 will see our trucks. They have the Budweiser and the Bud Light on the side. And we employ just over 500 full-time employees. We also have 100 temporary employees that work as weekend supplemental workforce because we're running 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. And the areas that we serve are Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, and South Carolina. Although because of the complexity of the brands that I showed you a few moments ago, you can find Cartersville beer as far away as Maui and all the way, any state south of Interstate 80. If you look at a U.S. map, Interstate 80 just about cuts north and south of the United States in half, and we service focused production brands to anything south of Interstate 80. So we have a very wide shipping pattern geographic area. And these are the brands. We have as big as Bud Light, and we have as small as Tilt Lemon Lime. We have Natty Up, and yet we have a seasonal Michelob called Marzen. We produce all of these. We produce them in bottles, cans. We produce them in 12 ounce, 10 ounce, 16 ounce, 22, 24, 32, and 40 ounce containers. Does anyone want another container? We can produce a bigger one or a smaller one. It doesn't matter. This is a can-do facility. We produce malt liquors. We produce alcohol variations depending on state law and consumer preference from 3.2% alcohol to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and one of them we produced was 12. That's the highest alcohol content that I have ever tasted in a beer. Unless, of course, you add something to it. So it's a very complex operation. It says that we have to bring our A game every day to our facility. There is no plan B at the Cartersville facility. We have to get what we need made when we said we were making it to make the shipping objective to our wholesalers, who will then stock the shelf so that you will not walk into a facility and cannot find the world's finest beer in the container size that you prefer. And that's what all of this really works towards. So where do you go from the top? In 1957, Anheuser-Busch took over as the #1 brewer in the United States. Prior to that, it was Schlitz. How many knows Schlitz beer? Not very many. That's how fast things change. But Schlitz was a predominant brand in this country through the 40s and 50s. In 1957, Anheuser-Busch took over, and we have never relinquished the #1 position for almost 50 years. And when you look at this, this is Budweiser over the last 30 years. Now, I know some of you aren't 30 years old, so you're thinking, man, that's pretty antique. But in fact, in 1975, the bottle on your right was the predominant package that sold in the United States. It was Budweiser, 12 ounce, and the bottle container was called a stubby. Yes, your fathers and forefathers were an affectionate group. In 1976, we tried to modernize the glass package, the bottle, and we went with what was called a flagship bottle at that time. Then the third one from the right is called the slope shoulder. It became known as the 7 1/4 bottle because of its height, not because of what it holds. It still holds 12 ounces. In the early 80s, there became a craze for trade return bottles. Those are bottles that are reused. Pollution, litter, and other government concerns drove many state governments to ask us to do a returnable bottle. The fourth one from the right is a returnable bottle. It gave way to what's called the long neck. The long neck has been around for about 10 years. Each one of these, if you'll note, becomes more modern in the graphics of the label. For example, the fifth one from the right has what's called cantered lettering. Never knew that cantered lettering would attract sales, but increased Budweiser sales almost 2% because of cantering the lettering of the word Budweiser. And then today we have the bow tie neck label. And the bow tie is also affectionately known as the Budweiser bow tie, and it goes all the way back to the original bottles in 1852 where we had bow ties on the neck labels to differentiate our product as they pulled them out of the cooler the bartender would recognize that that was a Budweiser and would pull it out first. So that's where we were up until this year. And then we said, where will Budweiser go in the future? What will be the 21st century Budweiser? And this is our plans to make Budweiser new and reinvented as original. The one on the right is the one that Andrew referred to. It is a 16-ounce aluminum container, all aluminum, high graphics, litho, that really makes a contemporary statement about the brand. This brand is now 152 years old, remember. And the middle bottle is the one that was the last bottle that we showed. It's the transition bottle, the long neck transition. The one on the right is very unique because it is a plastic sleeve label that is shrink wrapped onto the bottle. What makes that so unique is that we can customize Budweiser for any occasion that you can think of. Super Bowl, by the way, that is the 2006 Super Bowl Budweiser bottle right there. That if anyone was in Detroit, you actually got to sample one of those. We had samplings with the bottle to get opinions on the graphics of the thing. But we will do all kinds of specialty graphics with all of these. The Budweiser that you see over here, the aluminum bottle, we have Bud Halloween, Bud Holiday. We just ran Bud Holiday. Believe it or not, we're putting a green Christmas tree on that red bottle. Yes? It was a green bottle for St. Patty's Day. We're also doing a special red and black Falcons bottle. And for all of you NASCAR enthusiasts, we have a guy that you may have heard of that drives our car for us on a part-time basis. His name's Dale Earnhardt Jr. And we have a special number 8 Dale Earnhardt commemorative bottle. So for all of you who really want a commemorative bottle with Dale Earnhardt's picture on it and the number 8 car, you want to go out and get one of those. The whole thing started with that small bottle and has developed as we looked at what public and our consumers wanted, and we got more and more contemporary, again, so that you would say, yes, Budweiser, that's a brand that I drink, and not say, Budweiser, yeah, that's a brand my father enjoyed, because the future lies in you enjoying the world's finest beer. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Since you're in constant production of so many different types of beers, do you face any kind of inventory issues?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we ship 92% of all of our beer within 2 days. Our warehouse has a storage capacity of about 1.5 days of wholesaler inventory. But we ship no beer after 10 days. Now, the beer is good for 110 days from the born-on date that you can look on the label. It clearly states the date that the beer was born on, that it was made on. But that's one of the reasons why the Cartersville facility and most all of our facilities ship 100% truck, because we can get it to our wholesalers overnight in our patterns versus rail, which normally takes 3 to 7 days to get to its destination. Yes, sir.
Sir, how does your product compare with the so-called original Budweiser in the Czech Republic?
Oh, excellent question. As a matter of fact, I was asked that at lunch. Actually, the names are synonymous. The story goes that Anheuser-Busch was on one of his vacation trips to Europe, was in the Czech Republic, and met a brewmaster for the Budvar Brewery in Budvar region of Czechoslovakia. The Czech brewmaster said to Mr. Busch, please come over tonight. I have a beer that I want to share with you that I think is very drinkable. Remember now, that was prior to pasteurization. It was prior to being able to ship beer any distance because you did not have refrigeration. And Adolphus tasted the beer and said, this beer is outstanding. After several of these beers, Adolphus convinced the brewmaster for Budvar to share the recipe for that brand with him. He took that recipe back to St. Louis, Missouri, and Budweiser was born. And it became Budweiser. The brewmaster in Budvar began to develop his brand, And because of the Budvar region of Czechoslovakia called it Budweiser. Budweiser. About 80 years ago, we began a pushing and shoving contest over who has the absolute first name, Budweiser. Now, you wouldn't expect anything else from me but for me to stand up here and tell you we had the name first. However, there has been a World Court agreement that in Czechoslovakia and East Europe, Budvar Budweiser would be Budweiser. Elsewhere in the world, it would be Anheuser-Busch Budweiser. And we've reached a gentleman's agreement with that kind of approach to the name. The beers do not taste the same. Budweiser out of the Czech Republic has a definite European hops taste to it that our beer does not possess. Other questions? Yes,
Where did the image of the Clydesdale come from?
ma'am.
How did they defeat
The Clydesdale image, how many does not know what the Clydesdale hitch looks like? Because I was going to invite you to the brewery November 28th because we're going to have them at the brewery, and I wanted you to see them. The Clydesdales were a gift from August Bush I to his father, Adolphus Bush, to celebrate the repeal of Prohibition. And August Bush said, we're going to take this hitch of Clydesdales. And if you know anything about Clydesdales, they are working horses. While they are majestic and beautiful, they have been used for centuries to work farms and to pull beer wagons. So he said, we're going to take this hitch to Washington, and we're going to go right down Pennsylvania Avenue, and we're stopping at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and we're delivering the first case of beer to the president. And we did. We have photos in the brewery to commemorate that, but that was how the Clydesdale hitch was born. Today we have 6 traveling hitches that are almost 100% utilized throughout the year. You almost have to ask for them for parades or special events a year in advance. Even I have to ask for them in advance in order to get them to stop and put on a presentation. They will, however, be in Rome, Georgia for the Rome Christmas Parade. They will be the beer hitch in that parade. I believe that's November 30th. I think that's the day. So if you want to see them in a parade, that'd be the closest opportunity you'll have. Yes, ma'am.
Do you own the Bacardi liquor company or just the malt beverages? I don't know.
We do just malt beverages. We do not own any distilled spirits producers. We have looked at it. We have looked at it. You know, that comes from that thing, that pie chart. You know, if you can't beat them, join them. Well, we're beating them when we thought about joining. Yes, ma'am.
Do you get a drink on the job?
Now, wait a minute. I started with the company in 1979, and at that point you could drink on the job. Yes. In 1981, we changed that policy. We do, however, give all of our employees 2 cases of beer a month to take home for their enjoyment. In addition, the employees of the Cartersville Brewery get a case of every new product because they are the ambassadors of that product in the community. And they also can get a 4th case of beer as an incentive if we hit certain productivity and safety milestones. So all the Anheuser-Busch family gets enough beer to take home. They don't need to drink on the job. Yes, sir.
So you spoke about having problems with dealing with business in Russia. Would that be cultural or government interference?
Yes. It is. It's really both. It's also, you know, their currency is not very stable, so you can make a ton of it and take it to the bank and try to change it for a quarter. It's a very difficult transition situation that they're in, but it's worth an investment because we believe in the future of the Russian people. Really.
You don't have the same problems in China, do you?
Not at all, but we did. There was a lot of people that warned us about that when we went into that. A lot of people said the government is still unstable, and when the government sees the transition to capitalism, they're going to have a problem with that. That is not true. The government of China has been extremely helpful and has been a real partner in us doing business in their country. Yes, sir.
What do you think about the drinking age?
Well, looking at our market share and the fact that the industry's not growing, 18 would look pretty good to me, but actually, we're happy with 21. For those of you that are not 21 in this room, we'll wait, okay? Hopefully, we'll get to see you on your 21st birthday.
Anheuser-Busch survived the great experiment of prohibition, and many large breweries did not. What did you guys do during that period to get by?
Well, three things. Number one, we didn't panic. Number two is we looked for alternative sources to keep our employees actively employed. We did things, alternative beverages. The first non-alcohol beer was actually brewed during Prohibition. But the most important thing that we did was we planned for the future. We knew that the experiment would not be forever, and that somebody would have to be prepared to take a leadership role when Prohibition was rolled back, was repealed. Yes, sir?
Does Budweiser just outright advertise against other companies? And if they do they try to compete with the smaller companies? Do they ever compete with the companies that only are maybe a small percentage of the market?
Well, we have done competition and cooperation. For example, at lunch I was talking about micros, and in the middle 90s there were a lot of micros. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, you could just be as imaginative as you wanted and make a beer in the 90s and call it whatever you wanted. You could pick a color, an animal, and a type of beer, and you had a new product, you know, like Black Horse Ales. However, they found out it wasn't easy to repeat a recipe. And a lot of micros would call us and say, we just got a vat of beer and it tastes funny. And we'd say, send a bottle of it over, let's taste it. And we would tell them what the problem was with it and how they could correct that barrel of beer so that they could sell that. So that's cooperative. Now, we are also highly competitive, which means we want to compete in every segment that we do business in. We do not compete directly with SAB Miller. If you notice, as a matter of fact, SAB Miller wants to use our names in their advertising. Now, I'm married to a wonderful woman whose father was CEO of the 7th largest advertising agency in America. And one thing he taught me about advertising was never show your competitor's label on TV. Because you don't know who's listening, but you sure know who's watching. So you won't see us put our beer label up against anyone in an ad. But you'll see a lot of our competitors want to say, we're the same as, because they want to be number one. But when you're number one, what can really dethrone you is your lack of focus on quality, not what someone else is doing. And I mentioned to the group at lunch that whether you are a department head with Anheuser-Busch or whether you're the chairman of the board, you started on the production floor. I did 8 years on midnight shift running a Budweiser because we believe that you never stray far from where you actually make your money, and that's that production floor. And you need to know how quality is made and how quality errors are created. And I think that's what makes us number one and number two in brand.
Given that, will you or Jim just comment about internship experiences, career opportunities, and the like?
Sure, Jim, I'll talk and you jump in if I skip over anything. We are very future focused. I probably don't have that much longer with the company, but before I retire, but I'm trying to leave a legacy of young, very successful managers. And because of that, Jim and I, when we came to Cartersville, started an internship program. And we take young folks just like you, and depending on your discipline, we put you in your core discipline one summer, and then a peripheral discipline the second summer. For example, if you're an engineering student, your first summer is with me. Believe it or not, you get to spend the summer in my office. You get to see how decisions are made. You get to sit in on every meeting and conference call that I sit in on. I want you to know what it's like to have to make the decisions at the top. The next summer, you do your engineering core discipline. The third summer, you do production. You actually run a production process. And then the fourth summer, when you graduate, you probably have already offered and been accepted a position with Anheuser-Busch. So we have a very aggressive, very intense internship program that we believe rewards our interns for their hard work, and we think they do a wonderful job. We have, how many of them? Every department has one.
This year we had 16.
We had 16 interns in our facility at Cartersville. Now there is one asterisk to what I described. If you go back to that original United States map, there's 12 facilities. So the offer for a career employment may come from one of our sister breweries somewhere else in the United States. So if you really want to work for Anheuser-Busch, that is a part of the dark side if you want to stay in Georgia, is there's a good chance that you won't stay in Georgia. And if you are successful, you will not stay at one site anyway. We believe in giving you a well-rounded experience base for your senior management future. So you would expect to move a half dozen times with Anheuser-Busch in your career. Did that answer? Do you have any?
No, that's it. One interesting fact, we interviewed a young man yesterday. I think he graduated in 2001 from the University of Florida. What's he, 27 years old maybe? If he's fortunate enough to get a position in our brewing department here, it'll be his 4th brewery in that short career. So as Steve mentioned, we're all about different management styles, experiencing different cultures. From New Jersey, Steve mentioned, or Tim mentioned, Steve was born in Texas. We've been all over the United States, and it helps to do those cultural things, as well as experience the management, the different management styles, etc.
And Jim, would you just mention the weekend opportunities?
Sure. I had Dean Mescott up to the brewery this summer, at some point this summer. We've had a relationship for quite a while with Georgia Tech and looking at engineering disciplines. We've decided to expand that. We believe that that's not the only discipline that can be successful with Anheuser-Busch. We had lunch, did a little bit of a tour. We have a program, as Steve mentioned, it's a 24/7 operation. In addition to the full-time 500 and just under 550 full-time employees, we have well over 100 weekend relief operators that work either in our lab. We have several graduates from Kennesaw State that work in our lab, that work on the floor as operators or brewers, as well as maintenance technicians. In addition to that, we have a relief supervisor program. We call our first-line supervisor a group manager. That relief group manager will go through the same rigorous application selection process that we put others through. We will employ you as a manager, as a relief manager, and not as a full-time manager. I have to add that until you graduate. You must have a degree, an undergraduate degree, to work as a manager at Anheuser-Busch. But prior to that, you can work as a relief group manager, and it is quite profitable. During the training, you earn a wage above the hourly wage, which is the minimum wage in our brewery is $23.57 an hour. As a trainee, you would earn a little bit more than that. On Saturdays, approximately $337 for the day for the 8-hour shift, and on Sundays, about $447, about $750. I think we did the math yesterday with the HR supervisor. It's about $765 for 2 days worth of work, but we will work.
Steve, thank you.
I want to thank you very, very much. Some great insight. And I think it's fantastic to see someone who spent a career moving up to incredibly senior leadership position in one of this country's great historical, closely held businesses. It's a fantastic story. Second, Jim, I want to really thank you for making the call regarding the brewery's interest in you. Fantastic opportunities to get your feet wet literally on the weekend there at extraordinary financial gain, and then to look at career opportunities in an exceptional company like this. And so we've got something for both of you. Wanted to thank you, Steve, very much, and Jim, thank you as well, and thank you both again.